There Satan was, just as I had pictured him in my nightmares, dressed in rag, sitting on a throne while judging us with wild, piercing eyes that were brimming with hatred and madness. I was tempted to turn back and break the doomed progression towards the Lord of this empire, but the line moved too swiftly for me to just walk away. Well, that's not all. Secretly, I wanted to know what my friends would ask from the devil. Most of all, I wanted to see what happens after you unknowingly sell your soul to the devil. Most of my friends let their greed bleed out with lists of every toy, game and model set you could name. Some wishes were less typical, like Mitchell's. He was obsessed with wolves. Mitchell always said how much he wanted a wolf to live with him on his city-born parents' newly purchased farm. He asked Satan for a wolf, a kind wolf. The red man touched Mitchell's nose and said it would be so, as long as he believed in the magic of Satan. Mitchell said he believed without an ounce of doubt. Some asked for family members to return. Others asked for more money, for their families to get out of jail, for relatives not to be sick anymore. One asked to be taller. One girl wanted to be the prettiest of them all. One boy asked to be as powerful as Superman himself. All the while, the devil would smile and nod and ask the same question, "Do you believe in the magic of Satan?" And every single time someone I knew responded with a resounding yes, my soul cringed a little bit more. I didn't know why my friends couldn't see past this kind old man with a white beard. All I saw was a line walking and falling into an endless pit that had a shiny package dangling over it. Still, my father gently pushed me ahead towards the crimson staircase up to the throne. Everything seemed to stop, just to hear me ascend towards this earthly angel studying me with his fraudulent, friendly features. I could think of nothing to say during my climb. My mind was still completely blank when I reached the plateau. The devil reached out with a glove, red and rich, loaded in a white cuff. His voice was as deep and dark as the sea, like a dragon the size of a mountain range stooping and cooing to a little kitten. "Come closer." He waved his hand. "Closer, closer. That's good. The other children are not afraid. Why are you? Because you are not who you say you are, and you are not Santa," I whispered, too afraid to say anything else. The devil smiled as he said, "I'm the giver of gifts. I'm the only one that stands for all the children on this garden of earth." "You're a monster," I whispered. The devil smiled dim and his eyes sharpened. "Don't think sitting on some throne makes us overlook who and what you really are. You tell us to look at all the tragedies of God, and to only know glory through all of your gifts. But they are not your gifts. They are our gifts. They are made by us. They are gifted between us. You're a leech. You're a fraud. You're a lie. You are just like magic itself, a fake idea for the sole purpose of making this world a little less bitter." The old man's eyes twinkled as its red velvet hand touched the tip of my nose. "Do you want to know what gift you desire most of all?" The devil asked before letting a single word slither from its tongue. "Belief." A puff of white flash powder brought me back to reality as our picture was taken by one of its underlings. My father took my hand and asked me what I asked for Christmas. I was about to ask him if he knew the devil was sitting there and not Santa, but Satan himself. But in the end I let it go and ended up saying nothing. I know nothing good is going to come from some guy in a costume. My father appreciated my sardonic tone, ruffled my hair, and drove me home. Then lo and behold, the most remarkable end to a year my hometown has ever seen. Packages with strange postmarks flooded the post office addressed only to the children. Kids formed overnight gangs to ride on new expensive bikes that nobody could account for. The docile wolf/husky mix took up residence in Mitchell's parents' barn, a wolf that charmed and won over his overprotective parents and the animal control board. Terminal illnesses vanished overnight. The Russell family won the Mega Millions without needing to share the $281 million jackpot. Estranged parents and soured relationships healed. Bones and tissues restructured after the 25th of December for one boy. The boy was now taller than most men. The parents of Jacqueline LaRouche refused to believe the elated little girl who looked like a living Disney princess was actually their unfortunate-looking daughter before they questioned her. Rumors spread that little geeky Milton Green lifted and moved a truck that had fallen off the jack and onto his father. He moved it just like his hero Superman would do. I received nothing, just like I asked for. I kept close track of Satan's benefactors over the years, waiting for the moment when their gifts would turn on them, as I knew all deals with the devil end in tragedy. I stayed in my hometown after graduation, and so did they as well. which made it easy to keep close tabs on them over the months, years, and decades. It took a long time for me to accept that their lives were no worse off, and most, like the wealthy Russell family and superstar athlete Mel Green, were still enjoying their gifts without apparent ill effect years after the deal. Their success maddened me, and my hometown all came to know me as a kind of Grinch. When members of the town began to actively avoid me, I knew I had to hit the road and find the devil. I had to see if he was pulling the same trick off with unsuspecting children from another town and where their lives ended up. I began traveling the country, determined to find the devil again. I had seen many men wearing the devil's classic red suit attempt to recreate that scene in malls and department stores throughout America. But their eyes always deceived them. Their eyes were distant and sad. Eyes of men, not at all like the ones I remember. I questioned myself. I became disillusioned after coming to terms with wasting 20 years of my life in empty pursuit before I began to really believe that I was going insane, and finally quit. It wasn't until I was much older and after I had a child of my own that I remembered the red man on the throne again. My son had learned about Santa's existence and begged to see him. My son also suffered from acute seizures and didn't have many opportunities to get out into the world. I wasn't going to let his happiness be crushed by the blizzard raging outside, or by his father's insane fears about a man claiming to saw the devil dressed as Santa many years ago. So I packed up my son's emergency anticonvulsant medications and blazed a path to Tri Creeks Mall in the worst snowstorm in years. We arrived right before the mall closed. I saw the devil again, back upon his throne, unchanged from when I saw him decades ago. The devil smiled at me like a smug child stares at a mad dog behind a bulletproof window as it brought his gloved hand on the shoulder of my ascending son. I chewed on my rage as I watched them whisper to each other. My son nodded before falling to the ground. I rushed up the stairs to see my son in the middle of one of the worst epileptic seizures I had ever seen. I injected the first anticonvulsant as I held my son down. It felt like holding down a tune in its death flops. The initial injections did nothing for minutes of grand mal thrashing while 911 was being called. Unfortunately, the storm had put every unit out, and Tri Creeks Mall was far out. My son was still unresponsive even after I administered my last line of defense. But it was no use. My son was dying. I cradled my son's head, and as I felt his body's twitches become faint, I cried out for someone to help us. Anyone. The cry backed away while the piano solo of Holy Night twinkled on the mall's overhead speakers. Then, my son was dead weight. I heaved him up my shoulder and ran to the front doors of the mall, where more than 4 feet of snow had fallen against the door. I took 2 charging steps into sheets of falling snow when that deep, sad, sweet voice of Satan rumbled behind me. Where are you going? I'm taking my son to the hospital, I replied. The roads won't be plowed for hours, the devil said in response. Then I'll carry my fucking son there, I shouted before taking one more step forward. Now this time the snow coming past my knee. You die, said the devil. Then the God of meat where he can pick up 2 bodies, I said in response before breaking into tears. I kept my back to it as I wept. I didn't want the devil to see me cry. I felt a hand on my shoulder. I can make your son live again, said the devil. No, you can't, I shouted, half in a daze, too horrified at the sight of my son's dead eyes to even really respond. The hand began pulling on my shoulder because the devil wanted me to turn. I did, and I showed him my broken and distraught face. The devil smiled as he said, do you remember what I told you was the one thing you wanted most? To believe. I said without any hesitation. But I've searched so many years for you. It's over tonight. You can celebrate your newfound belief with your son. I buried my face into the crook of my son's neck, bawling and nodding while saying, I believe. My son's knee twitched as I felt his dead weight tighten up and grip onto me. Daddy. My eyes hurt. Why are we outside in the snow? I have never cried harder in my entire life. My son, my precious firstborn son, was alive and unharmed. By the time I came back to my senses, the parking lots had been cleared, the EMTs had arrived, and the devil was long gone. I wanted to honestly believe that would be the end of it. I convinced myself that it was a kind, rare act of graciousness to keep God guessing. I wanted to reconnect with everyone who got their gifts from Satan long ago, to tell them that I believed as well, and that my son was returned to me for it. No one answered their phones and nobody came to the door when I knocked. except to tell me that it was my bitterness that was the cause behind all this misery. I wanted not to know what they were talking about when they said this misery. I wanted to think that all of the people I kept track of were still living wonderful lives as they always have been, and not being killed off, one by one, in the strangest ways. But that wasn't the case. That ugly girl who wished to become the prettiest of them all accidentally trapped herself in a closet when a broom fell against the door, while she was all alone in that house for 7 days and 7 nights. She died of dehydration mid-claw through the drywall and insulation. Mel Green contracted a rare and volatile virus while building a church in South America. The Russells' newly expanded property slid down a hill and crushed 15 homes because they never got the building approved. Their millions vanished overnight, and Mr. and Mrs. Russell checked out early, leaving behind a 19, 12, and 8-year-old to fend for themselves. Not only did I ignore this, but I also ignored where my son was going every night when he said he was going out with his friends. None of my old thinking makes any sense to me now. I should have acted when I found Bill Russell's wallet under a loose floorboard in my garden shed. Finding out your kid has a wallet that isn't his is bad enough. Knowing that it came from a dead man was worse. There were other items, a scarf, a ring, a hood ornament, all of which I knew were not his. I ignored, obfuscated, and flat out lied for my son until I found the journal he always kept on him and saw my handwriting on it, down to the flourishing F's and D's. Written in it was my confession of how my anger and rage built up enough to go through the elaborate acts to bring misfortune to those I tracked for so many years after seeing no misfortune fall upon them. My son was responsible for over 50 deaths that had all been framed on me. I honestly believed I had lost my mind and was responsible for the murders until my son said to me, "I did it. I knew I was doing all these horrible things, but I couldn't stop my body. There's someone inside my head, Daddy, and they do all these things. It doesn't even talk to me. Daddy, you gotta leave. All of this was meant to frame you. It made my body call the cops and turn you in. They're coming. You have to get." Those were my son's last words. The sound came from out of the living room. I walked out to see a man in a red suit covered in the soot of my chimney, holding a red sack, from which the devil removed 2 wrap boxes. The first thing that happens after you sell your soul to the devil, Satan said as he placed one of the wrap boxes on the table between us, is you realize how valuable your soul is. It's always quality over quantity, is it? I knew you had a soul. I wanted as soon as your eyes met mine all those years ago. An unbeliever of evil. Almost everyone is trusting, but you. The process of turning the faithless into the faithful takes a lot of bikes and money and unexplainable medical phenomena all over the course of many years. Trapping an exquisite human soul like yours takes a lot of patience and skill, all a small price to pay. The devil removed the top to one of the boxes. It was a handbill. They'll find you guilty when they see all the personal items your son kept after his kills. Solitary confinement for life. Death will be slow and agonizing. I know you don't have a gun. Merry Christmas. Throw away all that rotting flesh. Don't worry. What we are going to do together is God's work. He patted my shoulder and walked to the door with one of the boxes in his hand. This one's for me. I've waited years to open it. I'm willing to wait a little longer, he said before leaving. I took the gun and opened my front door to shoot the devil in the back to see that he was gone. Not even footsteps were in the snow. I kept hearing sirens the entire time I was writing this letter. It will be in my pocket when the police find my body. Maybe one day this letter will get out, published on a newspaper or something. Hopefully they will read it and remember to not doubt or deny the truth they knew as a child, as I did. Real sirens now. I hear police are shuffling outside. No goodbye. I have a bad feeling I'm not going anywhere, like I'm trapped. I look around this empty house searching for any reason to not end it all. I hear voices of police officers outside that yell for me to surrender and give myself up. I wipe tears from my eyes and look down at that gun the devil gave me before he disappeared. I stare at the gun he gave me and move it slowly to my temple. I hear the police trying to break down the door now. It's only a matter of minutes before my fate is set. I can feel that cold steel the moment that it finally rests upon my head. The door breaks down and I can hear footsteps rushing in. I put my finger on the trigger and watch a life pass before my bloodshot eyes. I look over and see that the police are now standing in my living room, facing me with their guns drawn and shouting, "Drop the weapon now." I can't even make sense of what's happening. with the gun the devil gave me still rested on my temple. I smiled towards the distance and pulled the trigger, but nothing happened. My suffering didn't end. I was still alive, so I pulled the trigger again and it clicks with a fading silence. The police officers yell at me to drop the weapon once more, but I barely listened. I pulled the trigger again and again, but it wouldn't fire. In a state of shock and confusion, I moved the gun away from myself and aimed it towards the police. They opened fire. I suddenly felt a rush of pain within my body, and then I couldn't help but to slowly close my eyes, right before they finally closed forever. I saw that devil once more standing close beside. The last and only word I said to him was why. He smiled and then replied, "Do you truly believe that? I was never your light of hope or your righteous savior. I'm not some divine grace, a righteous saint, or another flawed truth. I'm the perfect lie.